Today we're going to talk about Chapter 8 in IT Essentials, and we're going to be dealing with printers. We're going to talk about some of the common print features, describe some characteristics and capabilities of printers, and identify printer connections and ports. We're also going to take a look at some comparison between different types of printers. The most commonly used printers that people have, they usually have inkjet printers in their homes. Usually places of your business use laser printers. We're going to talk about how laser printers operate, and then look at the parts and characteristics of thermal printers and impact printers, and then some characteristics of virtual printers, and the parts and characteristics of 3D printers. We're going to look at installing and configuring printers. We know that from our environment here at Mental Tech, it's just a matter of installing some software and then you're able to print campus-wide. And so it depends a little bit if you're doing a direct install of a printer in your home or what your business might be utilizing. You can also share printers. Obviously, that's what we do here at Mental Tech, for you to be able to print in any building at any time. And then what are some things that we need to take into consideration when we're doing some troubleshooting? As IT tech, sometimes that's something that we need to be taking a look at, and take a look at some preventative maintenance as well. So what are some things that we could do to prevent issues from happening in the future, especially with laser printers, thermal printers, impact printers, 3D printers, and then of course rounding everything out with the 6 steps of the troubleshooting process and looking at some common problems and solutions for printers. One thing that I want to make sure that I point out as we begin talking about printers is you don't have the luxury of being able to install individual printers here at school. We're going to talk about how you can share printers and how you can do preventative maintenance, but it's really important that you watch the videos that are provided to you within the curriculum. So to get started, there are different types of printers out there. Like I said, inkjet printers are typically what you may have in your home. They're not very expensive in terms of purchasing the printer. Most of them are networked printers now. Ink tends to be your consumable, which can cost anywhere from $20 to $28 for a black cartridge, and about the same price, maybe a little bit more, closer to $30 for a colored cartridge. Laser printers are typically, what you might find in your place of business, small business, larger businesses. Impact printers, those printers were from the older days when you could go. I always remember going into car dealerships and they would have impact printers that have a daisy wheel on them and would print information for you in triplicate, like on a white copy, a pink copy, a yellow copy kind of thing. Thermal printers are what you find in a lot of businesses. If they are folded up and kept in a wallet and they get moisture, then they turn all gray and you can't read what's on them any longer. So shelf life for paper is kind of a disadvantage for a thermal printer. And then the newest printers that we have available are 3D printers. So those are the 5 types of printers that we're going to be taking a look at. So when we talk about characteristics and capabilities of printers, we're looking at the printer speed, the quality, and the color. So the speed is how many pages per minute are you able to print, or the ppm. The quality would be your dots per inch or your DPI. So if I were looking at a printer and I saw that I have a couple of options, like a 600 DPI or a 300 DPI, you need to remember that the larger the DPI number, the better the image resolution will be. And so if you're really wanting nice, clear images, you need to have a higher DPI number, which will give you the best quality. In terms of color, we talk about CMY or cyan, magenta, and yellow for inkjet printing. We also have black, so that would be the K. So we have CMYK. And again, black for inkjets is your base color when you're talking about colors. Whoops. Reliability and total cost of ownership. So what do we mean when we're talking about that? So you want to take a look at a warranty. You know, what is covered in your warranty with your printer. Printers typically don't have very long warranties in terms of if you can find a warranty on a printer for a year, that's a good thing. You have to make sure that your printer is going to be reliable. So warranty is one of those things you're going to take a look at. The other thing you're going to look at is scheduled servicing. So that's just kind of based on the usage. An example that I can use here at Mental Tech is our printers are set up with the company that provided them to do some scheduled servicing, and the copier in the copy rooms are on scheduled servicing as well. And so you might have a contract that's for a year, and they'll make as many service calls as they need to keep your machines up and running. Some places say that they will do a monthly visit. If you don't use that monthly visit, then you can roll that over into the next month. And then if you need to use 2 in that month, you can do that too. It just kind of depends on what you have set up for scheduled servicing. You don't find many companies doing their own servicing anymore. MTBF, or mean time between failures. We talk about this not only with printers, it just seems to be the most logical, but in technology in general. You know, what is the mean time between failures? Meaning, how long is this item going to work? You know, what's the average length of time before it's going to fail? And so you should be able to find that information on the manufacturer's website or within the documentation of the device. And so, you know, if you are purchasing a device with a low MTBF, that's going to be better for you in the long run. You won't have to replace it as often. TCO is total cost of ownership. Again, just an example, you know, being able to talk about TCO with a printer, but we have TCO with anything, with cars that we buy, with appliances that we buy, etc. So when we look at the total cost of ownership, you know, it can seem really inexpensive when you go to a store and buy a $30 inkjet printer. And it comes with extra paper, and it comes with your ink cartridges, comes with USB cables if you're still hardwiring in. And we think that that's really great. And then you have to think beyond that. Okay, what are my consumables? So what does it cost me for paper? What does it cost me for ink? If I have a printer that has a separate CMYK cartridge for each color, you know, that's probably going to save me a little bit than those printers that have the color all in one. Because when, let's say, your yellow runs out, you still have cyan and magenta in there, but you're not going to be able to utilize it because you're out of the yellow. So again, something to think about. So what does it cost you to print a page? You know, here at Mental Tech, we say 10 cents a page for a black and white page. For colored pages, we say 25 cents. And so they're looking at what does the ink cost? You know, we're using laser printers here. What does the paper cost? You know, we have to figure in maintenance costs too. What does it cost us to be able to maintain those devices? And then any possible warranty costs that there are. So when you're looking at your TCO or your total cost of ownership, what is it going to cost me to own this particular device? Laser printers, a lot of them now, or a lot of printers in general, even inkjet printers can come with the ADF or the automatic document feeder. So again, lasers, inkjets, the paper just feeds right into the printer. You might even be so lucky as to be able to do some collation, which means, let's say I have a 3-page document. I can print, or I can collate those together. So I can print page 1, 2, 3 of a set and then print page 1, 2, 3 of the next set. Or if I choose, I can print all the page 1s, all the page 2s, all the page 3s, and then assemble them myself. So it just kind of depends, but that ADF feeder is really nice to be able to make those copies and then to be able to do document collation as well. Okay, so let's take a look at some printer types. So let's do comparison. First of all, you have to make sure that you have a compatible interface to be able to connect your printers. Most home printers use USB or a wireless interface. Some may have network cables. Usually that's what you find in a small business, in educational setting. You're going to have some network connections to connect your devices. So in terms of characteristics and how you're going to connect your devices, it could be a serial interface, it could be the old parallel interface, USB, possibly FireWire, Ethernet, and wireless. Those are the different types of connections that you would be looking at. Inkjet printers, they're very easy to use. They're cheaper than laser printers, have some advantages. Low cost, high resolution. Disadvantages, some nozzles are prone to clogging. Cartridges can be expensive and ink can be wet after you're printing. The one thing that's really important to remember is that if you're using an inkjet printer, make sure you buy inkjet paper. If you buy laser paper, you're going to have issues with it sticking to the paper. The same with if you have a laser printer, you need to make sure that you're using laser paper. If you use inkjet paper, that laser heat is just going to like melt or burn everything to the paper, and then you're going to have some issues. So make sure that you're using the correct paper. When you're working with your inkjet cartridges, you know, we talk about the advantages of being low cost because in general it's pretty inexpensive to purchase one. Like I said, you might be able to get one for less than $30. And they have really good resolution. In terms of the nozzles being prone to clogging, it kind of depends on what you have for ink that you're using. They always say use proprietary ink. So if you buy an HP printer, you should use HP ink. I know that you can go online and you can find ink that's a lot cheaper, a lot less expensive. The problem that you may run into is the impurities that you can potentially have. And when I talk about impurities, just kind of like when we talk about alcohol, how you can have impurities in alcohol that's 70% or less versus alcohol that's 91%. I will say one of the very first printers I purchased back in 1994 was an inkjet printer. Back then they were like $650. We did not use proprietary ink. We used an off-brand ink, and we were very fortunate, we were told, because our print head, that printer today still works. That's probably one of the things that goes awry is the print head. You have a couple of different types of inkjet printers. You have thermal, and you have what's called piezoelectric. And so thermal, you have this pulse of electrical current that's applied to those heating chambers around the nozzles. It kind of creates a bubble, and then it forces that steam forces that ink out onto the paper. Whereas piezoelectric, you're dealing with crystals that are located in the ink reservoir. A charge is applied to the crystal, which causes it to vibrate, and that's what causes the flow of ink onto the paper. Within your inkjet printers, you have your rollers, your feeders, your duplexing assembly, and then your carriage and belt as well. So here are those parts. There's the roller, the carriage and belt. There's the print head we're talking about. Typically in an inkjet printer, that's one of the things that needs to be replaced. You have your duplexing assembly. You have the feeder. You can kind of see how all those little tiny fibers of paper can get left in there, dust, and can cause some issues. And then you have your ink cartridge. This is an example of one where you have separate ink cartridges for each color, and then the paper that you would have for your device. Laser printer characteristics. Laser printers, very high quality, fast printers. They use the laser beam to be able to create the image. You have a low cost per page with your laser printer because of the size of the ink cartridges that you have. You have high page per minute output, high capacity, high quality. It's fast. it uses the laser beam or the LEDs to create the image. The print comes out dry, whereas an inkjet, it may be damp yet when you get that piece of paper. The disadvantages, you have a high initial startup cost. I'll never forget the first laser printer that we bought here at Mitchell Tech for our business department at the time, $5,000. And then each ink cartridge cost like $1,200. So you had a cyan, a magenta, a yellow, and a black. But, you know, that ink would last well over a semester in any given class, almost a year. So it didn't take long for it to end up paying for itself. But laser printers are what are preferred by most people just because of the image quality and the quickness of being able to print. So when we talk about the characteristics of the laser printers, we have different components. Your imaging drum is the central part of that laser printer. It's a metal cylinder. It has a kind of a light-sensitive insulating material on it. When the beam of laser light strikes the drum, it kind of becomes the conductor where the light then hits it. Your toner cartridge, as the drum rotates, that laser beam kind of draws that electrostatic image on the drum. And that's where the toner has to be applied. The toner is negatively charged. Toner is like plastic and metal particles. And so that electrostatic charge is attracts the toner to the image. And then when the image is exposed with the paper, that's how it attaches itself. The toner cartridge and paper are probably your primary consumable items that you have with a laser printer. You know, so always make sure how to properly remove a toner cartridge. You don't want to get the toner on your hands if at all possible. It's very difficult to get off and very difficult to get out of your clothing as well. The fuser assembly, when the paper goes through the fuser assembly, there's hot rollers in there and that will melt the toner to the actual paper. Then up here we have the transfer roller. That helps to transfer the toner from that imaging drum to the paper. Then over here we have our pickup rollers. They're located in different areas throughout your printer. They just move that sheet of paper from one tray or cassette through the printing process. And then this last one down here in the bottom right corner is your duplexing assembly. It kind of turns the page once it's been printed on so that it could then be printed on another side if you were printing duplex. So you will be kind of tested on the different phases of the laser printing process. In the resources tab in my tech, I do have a sheet in there with some links on it that you can go in and reference the laser printing process. It is just kind of fascinating to go and take a look at the process. It's also here within the PowerPoint. So what happens from start to finish as you're printing? The first thing is so you need to know that there are 7 steps. And you start out with the processing. So you're going to convert that data into a printable form so that it can be read. Some laser printers have what's called a graphical device interface, or GDI, used by Windows applications to display those printed images on a monitor, so you don't have to do the conversion. The second step is the charging. So the image on the drum is conditioned for a new image. So the wire, sometimes referred to as the primary corona, the wire grid or roller gets a charge of about -600 volts DC, and that's uniform across the surface of the drum. That charged wire or grid, like I said, called the primary corona, and the roller is called the conditioning roller. Step 3 is the exposing. So to write the image, the photosensitive drum is exposed with the laser beam. Every portion of that drum that is scanned with the light has a surface charge reduced to about a negative 100 volts DC. So the electrical charge has a lower negative charge than the rest of the drum. And as the drum turns, an invisible image is created on the drum. The fourth step is developing. And so that's where the toner is applied to the image on the drum. There's a blade that kind of holds the toner at a distance from the drum. And as the toner moves from that blade to the more positive charged image, to be placing it on the drum. Then we go to transferring. As the paper rolls through, the image is transferred to the paper due to a charge that's applied to the paper. So the corona wire puts that positive charge on the paper, and because the drum was charged negatively, the toner on the drum can now be attracted to that paper. The image is on the paper, and it's held in place by that positive charge. Because color printers have 3 cartridges of toner, a colored image must go through multiple transfers in order to be complete. Some color printers have to write multiple times onto the transfer belt to make sure that that image is complete. So step 5 is transferring. Step 6 is fusing. So because that image is being held on that paper, now heat and pressure can be applied to that paper so that it can be permanently fused to the paper. So as it goes through those rollers, that toner that's being held on there is melted and fused with the fibers in the paper, and then it shows up in your output tray. It could be, like I said, turned over so that it could duplex if you have duplexing capabilities, because it can be printed on both sides. And then step 7 is the cleaning phase. And if you've ever printed on the color printer here at school, the one across from Connie Schroeder's office, it will say cleaning because it has to do that. So once that image has been deposited onto the paper, the drum has separated from the paper, any remaining toner has to be removed from the drum. And so there's a blade that kind of scrapes that excess toner off of there. And then it's stored in a used toner container that eventually can be discarded or emptied. So again, I know that there is a little activity in your curriculum that has you put the 7 steps in the correct order based on definition. You need to make sure that you know the steps in the laser printing process. You know, I'm not really sure why. I can tell you that whenever you go to take a certification exam, that's one of the things that they always talk about are the different steps of the laser printing process. And I think part of it is because they're just so popular within companies and businesses. Moving on to thermal printers. They're used, like I said, in your retail world. So at your gas stations, your gas pumps, when you go to a restaurant, they're part of like the register system, how you used to have fax machines. Thermal paper is chemically treated and has a very waxy quality. And again, it becomes black when it's heated. So after a roll of thermal paper is loaded, an electrical current is sent to that heating element, to the print head, and then the heated areas are how you see the image on your page or on your receipt. You know, the advantages, they last a long time. The printers themselves do, because you don't have as many moving parts, and they're very quiet. And there's no cost for ink or toner because it's something that's melted onto the page. But the disadvantages is that the paper itself can be very expensive, and so it has to be stored at room temperature because, like I said, if it gets moist, if it gets too cold, if you've ever taken a receipt and folded it up and put it in your wallet and then, you know, it gets damp, sits out in a cold car, you'll notice that it starts to get black, and pretty soon you won't be able to read what was on it. So the images of the paper can degrade over time. And, you know, I guess another disadvantage is if you needed color, a thermal printer does not afford you the opportunity of being able to have color. Impact printers, I would really think that these are pretty much obsolete. Dot matrix daisy wheel printers, you guys probably don't even remember. Typewriters. Typewriters used to use dot matrix daisy wheels. Impact printers have like a head and it's striked and inked ribbon with pins. So the more pins that you had, the better quality output you would have. Advantages were that the ribbons were less expensive. They can use regular paper, continuous feed paper. They can print carbon copies. Disadvantages, very noisy. When I worked at Dakota Wesleyan in the business office, we would generate letters. I worked in collections, and so we would generate letters to send to people who had defaulted on loans. And we had a separate room away from our office that we would send the print jobs to because the impact printer was so incredibly noisy. Graphics, if you were lucky to have any sort of graphic, was very low resolution. And then limited color capabilities. We thought it was great when we got a ribbon that had black, red, and blue because then you could have 3 different colors with your impact printer. But again, I would say, in my opinion, they're pretty much obsolete. Virtual printer characteristics. So you have different methods of sending a print job to a file. And so you have print to file. It saves your data within a file. And then it can be printed quickly at any time without having to open the original document. Print to file can now be saved in other formats. As you can kind of take a look at this slide, it can be saved in different formats. You can print PDF, which is one of the things. It was released as an open standard in 2008. So people don't really print hard copies of much anymore. Everything's done to PDF. You also have the XPS, which was a Microsoft Windows Vista thing. It wasn't meant to be an alternative to PDF. Sometimes you find XPS and sometimes you don't. It just kind of depends. We used to do print to XPS an awful lot when we were doing PowerPoint presentations because we didn't want students printing all of the slides to their PowerPoint. Then you also had print to image, so you could print it as a picture, like a JPEG or a TIFF file. Whoops. Cloud printing sends a print job to a remote printer. The printer could be at any location within your organization's network. So that's pretty much what we're dealing with here at Tech. Some printing companies provide software that you can install and then send print jobs to the closest location. It's really nice that you could do a print job in the tech center and you're in a hurry and you leave class and you get down to the Nordby Trade Center and you're like, oh, I forgot to grab that print job. You should be able to tap your card on the printer there and be able to access it. Another example of cloud printing is Google Cloud Print. Allows you to connect your printer to the web, and after it's connected, you can send print jobs to your printer no matter where you're located. 3D printer characteristics. Used to create three-dimensional objects. These objects have to be designed using a computer. There's a lot of different media now that can be used to create these objects. But most of the time when you talk about 3D printer characteristics, especially when you're a beginner, you're talking about the use of that plastic filament. It's added in layers to create the object. Traditionally, machines cut or drilled pieces out of raw material to create the object. But now it's done in layers or small bits. And so that's 3D printing. I'm not exactly sure what this object is there that they're printing. As far as parts, filament is the material that's used to create the object. There's different types of plastics. I think in your curriculum they talked about ABS, PLA, PVA, and then you've got filaments that are made of nylon, metal, wood. You just need to check the 3D printer manual to see what type of filament it is that's going to be required for your particular device. You have your feeder. It takes the filament from the tube and then it pulls it down so that it can be heated through your hot end nozzle, which is down here at the bottom. When the filament is heated to the correct temperature, it's extruded from the hot end nozzle. Then up here in the upper right, you have your axis. It's one of several bars on which that hot end nozzle travels to dispense the filament. The axes are vertical or horizontal, so the hot end nozzle can be located within a specified location in the environment so that it can print the object the way that it needs to. And then you have your print bed, and that's just the platform that heated filament is going to be on to create your object. So we've talked about different types of printers. We've talked about different printer parts. Now we need to look at installing and configuring. When you go to install a printer, it doesn't matter what kind of printer it is. You need to make sure that you follow the manufacturer's instructions. You need to know that they're packaged very well. So before you ever connect power to a printer, you need to take the printer out of the box that it came in. You need to open up the printer. You need to make sure that you have removed any little plastic tabs, that you've removed any styrofoam pieces that may be in there. That's trying to hold things in place so that they're not damaged during shipping. But you need to make sure that you remove everything. Give it a good once over because things can shift during shipping. You want to keep all of the original packing in case you have to return the printer. Most people say to me, inkjet printers cost $30. If there's a problem with it, I'm not going to send it back. I'm just going to get a different one anyway. But just as a good rule of thumb, make sure you keep all of your packing material. It's also important. We might think we know everything we need to know to hook up a printer, but it's really important that you read the instructions. Sometimes our printers need to have drivers, which again, we talk about a driver as being that little extra bit of code that's needed to allow your hardware to communicate with the device. So for your printer or your printer and your computer to be able to communicate. And it might need to be installed before you ever connect it to your computer. So it's really important that you read those instructions. If the printer has like USB, FireWire, parallel port, make sure that you've got the cable that you need. That was one way initially that they tried to make printers look very inexpensive, is they would omit whatever cable you needed because they figured you would need to go buy whatever type of connection you wanted anyway. Then you're going to make sure that the cable to the printer and the computer are connected, or that you've connected the network cable. If you need to do that, make sure it's installed into the network port. Once everything's properly connected, then attach the power and then plug it into the wall or wherever you're going to plug that into. Make sure that you test your device once you have it installed. Test all the functions. So if it's supposed to print double-sided, can you print double-sided? What paper tray are you printing from? What are your color settings? Do you want it to only print in black and white or grayscale? And I don't know if you've noticed here at Tech, but it's been preset for students so that you don't waste a lot of colored ink. I believe by default, certain applications will only print in black and white or grayscale. They will not print in color for you. You know, It's a good thing to print in draft mode unless it's something that you really need to look good for something. Printing in draft mode uses a lot less ink. OCR, if you have anything with a scanning bed on it and you use OCR, that's your optical character recognition, and so what you do is you can lay like a hard copy document on the flatbed, and then it'll recognize those characters and pick those things up so that you don't have to sit there and print it all out again. And then, will your document print in terms of being collated? Like I said, if you have to do a lot of copies of documents, collating saves you tons of time. That's why people like copiers so well, because you can set it to print double-sided. You want 8 copies, you want it stapled in the upper right-hand corner, etc. And so, some copiers do allow for that stapling. Most devices are all-in-one devices. So you can copy, you can scan, you can print, but just make sure that you've gone through all of the features and that you know that you're able to use those features. In terms of configuring your device, these are just some common configuration settings. What type of paper, what print quality do you want? What are you going to do? Color, black and white, grayscale, standard size of paper, orientation, portrait, landscape. Are you going to print normal, banners, booklets, posters, two-sided printing, collation? So those are some configuration options. You have some media control options, which, input paper tray, or what's the output path going to be? What's the weight of the paper? And believe it or not, that makes a difference. And you can use those features on the printers that we have here at Tech. So you can manually feed a sheet through if you're going to print an envelope or you're going to print a sheet of labels. The paper weight also, we have some cardstock, and that cardstock, the reason you need to know the weight is because it's heavier, so it's going to take it longer for those rollers to be able to pull that paper through and make sure that the image is transferred correctly onto your document. And then you have your color management and your print speed in terms of printer output. So color management, are you looking at screen printed color or the actual colors that they're set to, and then your print speed. Software optimization, use the print driver software. You can configure your print spool settings. So you can cancel or cause print jobs in the print queue. When multiple people are sending jobs to the print queue and you tap your card, you can print yours. I go tap my card, I can print mine. Color calibration is just adjusting the settings to match the colors on the screen to the colors on the printed page. I notice a lot when I have banners printed here at school, when they print on the plotter. I will have something that looks very nice and purple on the screen, but when it prints off on the plotter, you can see more of that magenta hue to it. So that's always one thing that I want to go in and make sure that my color calibration is set correctly. And then paper orientation, are you printing in portrait or landscape? Hardware optimization. Some printers can be upgraded to print faster, to accommodate more print jobs by adding hardware. The hardware might include additional paper trays, sheet feeders, network cards, expansion memories. We talk about firmware, similar to installing print drivers, because firmware updates don't take place automatically. You have to go to the manufacturer's website to check on firmware. The other thing is printer memory. All printers have RAM. You can see the chips, just like we take a look at when we're working with PC hardware. Printers usually arrive from the manufacturer with enough memory to deal with whatever print jobs you might have. But if you start working with things that are heavily graphic intensive, it might run more efficiently if you have more memory because it increases the print speed. and enhances the performance of those. You also have what's called print job buffering, and that's when a print job is kind of stored or captured in internal memory. Buffering is really common with laser printers. Also, like I said, plotters. If you get what's called a low memory error, it can tell you that it's out of memory or it has memory overload and that you would have to add some more memory to your machine. Sharing printers. Windows will allow you to share printers. Sometimes you have to install some drivers to be able to make sure that you can share. But if we take a look at these figures, they're not the clearest. I apologize. This just shows us how we can get started with Windows 10. You have to keep in mind security issues when you do sharing. Hard drive caching, meaning that print files can be cached or stored. Remember, we talked about CHE and how it means storage. So someone with access to the device could recover a file that might be confidential. So you have to be careful with that. User authentication, making sure to prevent unauthorized users in a network or cloud-based environment. They need to have permission to be able to print. And then, anytime that you're sending something over the network, you have the possibility of having it intercepted and read. So you're going to go to the Change Advanced Sharing settings, and then under File Print Sharing, if you want to do file print sharing, you need to make sure that it is turned on. Wireless printer connections are how most people connect. You can use Bluetooth or you can use your Wi-Fi connection. If you're using Bluetooth, obviously you have to be paired. Wireless printers can use that Wi-Fi connect to directly or connect to your wireless routers. Remember, when we talk wireless, we're talking about the 802.11 standard. And so any devices that you're using have to support that same standard to be able to print wirelessly. Purposes of print servers. Sometimes you have to have a separate print server to allow for the network connectivity, because sometimes you have printers that don't have built-in network interfaces. So print servers let multiple computer users access a single printer, which is basically what we're doing. We administrate the print jobs. They're stored in a queue until we're ready to retrieve them. Sharing a printer from a computer has disadvantages. When we first started doing print sharing, even in our home before we got a networked printer, we just had it shared off our home desktop system. Well, if that desktop system was shut off, then obviously you weren't able to use the print sharing. So it can have some disadvantages, but it's just kind of nice to know that if you don't have the capability for wireless, you can set it up kind of as a server to be able to do that printing. There are software print servers. So in some cases, you have a PC sharing a printer and it's running on an operating system that might not be Windows. Mac comes to mind. An example I think that they're using here is this Bonjour printer, which is Apple's free print server. It's built into a Mac OS. When it's downloaded and installed, it operates in the background and then can detect any compatible printers for the network. Again, if the computer print sharing is down, then the printers, you're unable to be able to print. Hardware print servers, simple device with a network card and memory, connects to the network and communicates with the printer to enable the print sharing to occur. And so in our example, we can see here that our printer is connected via a USB cable to the print server. And so it can be integrated with wireless devices like a router. And again, you have that connectivity capability. It can help manage the network printing. You can see up here we've got the Apple iPad. Apple uses what's called Airport Extreme. That's their hardware print server. A hardware print server is always available to users, unlike a printer shared from a user's computer. Dedicated print servers, they have a powerful processor because they're dedicated. It can manage and route the printing information. Has to be fast enough to handle any and all incoming requests. Has to have adequate storage space for queued documents. All documents are placed in a queue, and then they're retrieved and printed in a timely manner, and then it also has to have adequate memory. So the processor and RAM just have to be able to handle sending the print jobs to the printer. If you don't have enough memory, like we said before, then you're going to have some issues being able to print. So you need to make sure that you have enough memory. So maintaining and troubleshooting printers, follow the manufacturer's guidelines. They say up here vendor guidelines. Make sure you've read the documentation. Make sure you followed their recommended maintenance processes and instructions. There are some manufacturers who sell maintenance kits. That's entirely up to you depending on how long you're going to have your equipment. Like I said, most companies nowadays don't maintain their own devices. They have a company that does it because they're certified technicians for that particular piece of equipment, and they know what needs to be done. They order the parts, they come out, they fix it, it's up and running, instead of companies trying to provide the manpower to be able to deal with that. Do be sure that you watch the Inkjet Printer preventative maintenance. Just talking about making sure that you replace ink cartridges, that you clean the print heads, that you remove paper jams, that you get rid of the dust and the dirt and the debris that you might have there. I believe there's also a video on laser printer preventative maintenance. Again, make sure that you take a look at that. Sometimes you have to replace the toner cartridges. Very rarely do you have to replace rollers or fuser assemblies, but sometimes you have to calibrate your laser printers. So make sure that you watch that video. Preventative maintenance on a thermal printer, again, you're going to follow the documentation from the manufacturer. Make sure you replace paper, clean the heating element. Again, they're saying use isopropyl alcohol, use compressed air, or a lint-free cloth to remove the debris. Lint-free cloth to remove the debris. I apologize for that. Impact printers. Again, look at the documentation. Here's your little pins. Sometimes the print heads need to be replaced. I'm going to be honest. I've been teaching here for 18 years and never have I done preventative maintenance on an impact printer. I just can't imagine that you'll ever have to deal with that. But they do put it in your curriculum, and so why? Because evidently it's possible you could be asked a question, so we want to make sure that we cover that information. I believe there's also a video in there on 3D printer preventative maintenance. Like being able to replace the filament, cleaning the print bed, replacing the hot end nozzle, etc. So make sure that you take a look at that video. And then also, since we don't have access in our program to a 3D printer, watch the video on printing. It'll show you a little print job. And so make sure that you take a look at that. So the last thing it moves us into is the 6 steps of the troubleshooting process. You need to make sure, identify the problem, establish a theory of probable cause, test the theory to determine the cause, establish a plan of action to resolve the problem and implement the solution, verify full system functionality if applicable, implement preventative measures, and then again, step 6, document your findings, actions, and outcomes. So they just give you some examples in this PowerPoint. Screenshots, I believe, come right out of your curriculum. So identifying the problem, types of open-ended and close-ended questions that you can ask with regard to the printer, establishing that theory of probable cause. What are some things that are wrong? Honestly, these are the things that are most likely wrong: loose cables, paper jams, power, low ink, out of paper, etc. Then we want to test the theory. What is it that we have to do? Sometimes just simply restarting the printer or the scanner causes the problems. A lot of times you have to remove paper jams. Don't be afraid to open every little compartment that you're finding to make sure that you remove them. The nice thing about copiers and printers nowadays is they kind of give you a step-by-step. If there's a paper jam, it'll kind of show you little images as to where to go to be able to fix those paper jams so that you're able to move on. Just make sure that you close all of the doors completely so that you're able to print. Step 4, establish a plan of action. What are you going to have to do? Make sure that you refer to FAQs. You might have to ask other technicians. Look at the repair log for the device. That could tell you an awful lot. Step 5, verify full system functionality, and if applicable, implement preventative measures. Print a test page. Make sure that it's working. A lot of printers, you can just push a button to print a test page, which is fine. Like, you can print an HP test page, but then print a document so you know that it works from the computer to the printer, and make sure that the customer understands and knows what it was that you did. And then document any findings. Make sure that you've signed any paperwork, that you've journaled anything that you need to, that you've kept track of the components that you used for the repair, and that you document the time that you used. Okay, and then finally, printer problems and solutions. You'll want to refer to these last couple of areas in your curriculum. Each one of these items that you can highlight will tell you something different as to what the probable cause is and what the solution is. So this first one, an application document doesn't print. It says the probable cause is there's an error in the print queue. Maybe you need to cancel the document and resend it. So you can click on the little PDF button in your curriculum and it'll give you a whole PDF printout of all of these problems with the solutions. And I think there's one more. Some advanced problems and solutions. So printer prints unknown characters. This happens to people a lot. It could be a problem with the print driver. Maybe you need to install a new print driver, or it could be that there's some cables that are loose. Again, you can click on this Show to PDF, and it will show you each one of these problems and what the possible solutions are. So that's the end of Chapter 8. Here's the terminology that was utilized within the chapter. Let me see if I end my show. Let me just take you out here to, maybe I can take you out to my tech. Okay, so let me pull this up for you here. If you go over to the Resources tab in my tech, let's go to Student View, and I'm just going to come down real quick find Chapter 8. So you're going to see there's a study guide. There's the Understanding Laser Printers. This is just a Word document that has some links on it. Here is the PowerPoint that I just went through. And then I also put together a review PowerPoint for you that just kind of hits some of the high points that you may possibly be asked for the test. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to let me know.